this ongoing boycott is like just spreading like wildfire across the conservative, websites and infrastructure and whatnot. And Nate was just telling me, Nate, who runs all of our video stuff here, that in our YouTube chat room, somebody suggested, hey, conservatives love these kind of pointless boycotts, right? I mean, it doesn't produce any results, but it makes them feel good, right? So maybe we could convince them that toilet paper is a liberal plot, right? Or that the toilet paper manufacturers are liberals, and get Republicans to just, well, no, that's going to get pretty weird. Anyhow, Gloria in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Gloria, what's up?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I have a beef about women being controlled by white men, not being able to get birth control,
right.
Planned Parenthood, abortions. My mother had 6 children. She could not afford us. We didn't have any shoes. My dad had 3 children. He never paid child support for any of them. And my mother would not have had 6 children. She didn't even want us, but she couldn't get birth control or abortion. So what is the problem? The book you read out of, The Population Explosion, that's why.
Yeah. No,
what do you think?
I think you're absolutely right, Gloria. The the state of the art around population control, just as recently as 15 years ago or so, was that there were 2 major camps saying, here's how we control population. One camp was saying we need more birth control devices and more availability of birth control devices all over the world, which is true. But there's only about, at that time, I'm not sure what the numbers are right now, but I wrote extensively about this about 15 years ago. It's in my book, Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. At that time, there were only about 700 to 800 million women in the world who absolutely lacked any access to any form of contraception, out of 6 billion people on the planet at the time. So, A, that wasn't the problem, and B, there are a lot of countries where birth control is widely and easily available, and yet women still have 6, 8, 10, 12 children. And particularly in the Middle East, you see this. So it's not just access to birth control. That's kind of a secondary thing. It's access to power. But anyhow, that was one camp was saying birth control. The other camp was saying it's economic. That if you look at Western Europe and the United States, as people become more affluent, they tend to have smaller families. And again, there's lots of evidence that indicates that. And so what they did is they came forward and they said, therefore, and this was 15, 20 years ago, therefore what we need to do is have more international trade deals and more of the World Trade Organization, and raise the standard of living of everybody in the world up to the bottom end of the middle class of the United States, where families start getting smaller and smaller. And the problem with that is that if everybody in the world lived at the standard of living of the poverty level in Appalachia, then it would take 4 planet Earths to provide the raw materials necessary to provide all that.
They're trying to take ACA away from us, and part of that is birth control, Planned Parenthood. We were brought up on welfare. If my mother didn't have 6 children she couldn't feed, why would she? Then she wouldn't be on welfare. She could have got a job and worked. But right now the Republicans are trying to take away our health care, which is Planned Parenthood and birth control. So right now the Republicans in the United States are trying to take this away from us, and that's part of the poverty problem in America.
Right, and I totally agree with you, Gloria, and the point that I'm making is that it's not just that the Republicans want to take away your birth control. It's not just that the Republicans are playing some game that has to do with patriarchy or whatever. It's that they actually don't want you as a woman to have power in most dimensions of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And
so if I have 10 children, I can't get a job.
That's right. And birth control and abortion is just one dimension of that. They want you to be the property of your husband or your father. They want patriarchy is like embedded in our culture. It's in Genesis. It's
that black lady talked about issues, and I think that white women have the very same issues in a different way than black people, because we're being controlled by having a bunch of kids that we can't feed, and the men take off on us too. And here we are. My mom with 6 kids, she couldn't feed us.
Yep.
See, we have the same dilemma, just different.
I agree. Patriarchy is real and is toxic
and how can we? So
and doesn't respect.
Have to just keep fighting this ACA thing and just make sure that we keep our health care, because it is really important.
Absolutely, and we need to be fighting for the rights and for the empowerment. And as a white man saying this, it almost sounds patronizing, like, oh, we're going to give some power to little women. But I don't know how else to say it. It's that when women have equal power with men, population stabilizes. Whether there's access to birth control or not, once they've got that power, they figure out how to get it, and whether or not they have access to wealth or not. When it's a matter of, it's not an issue of wealth. That argument about these two things, birth control or money. They're both wrong. It's about power, and that's the thing that nobody wanted to talk about 15, 20 years ago, and thank God people are talking about it right now. Gloria, I got to move on, but thank you for the call.
This guy that's in the White House right now hates women. He'd love to keep us under his thumb, keep us pregnant and barefoot.
Yes, I mean, look at 3 wives, look at, I need not go through the list. I'm with you, Gloria. Thank you very much for the call. Great to hear from you. Albert in Vancouver, BC. Hey, Albert, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Great. How do you like your health care up there in Canada, by the way?
It's good, but we're not as good as I think you think we are about First Nations people and how we treat them up here. But that's a different topic.
Okay.
I was hoping to sort of get your opinion on Julio Rivera. He was on your show a little earlier and said he was making the point in one of your discussions that the Southern strategy is a myth, and that he said the point that I've heard other libertarians make, that Strom Thurmond was the only Dixiecrat to switch, which isn't true. But can you just sort of debunk their debunking of the Southern strategy? From where I see it, comes from a book from a University of Pennsylvania and the University of Wisconsin professor that says that the reason the party switched was because the South got more affluent. So in the 50s, the low-income decile voted for Republicans 43%. By the 80s, it was 51%. And the higher income, it was 53% in the 50s, and that rose to 77% in the 80s. And that still doesn't even prove their point, because then the 7% increase would still account for that. I just sort of would love
Albert, what you're demonstrating is the old saying. It's been attributed to Abe Lincoln, among others, that figures don't lie, but liars can figure. And, and I mean, it's a very, very simple thing. And in fact, Louise and I saw the movie LBJ over the weekend, and it really illustrates this moment in 1964 when the Democratic Party and Lyndon Johnson decided to fundamentally change the message of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party that had been founded by Thomas Jefferson and had basically been the party of slavery up through the Civil War. The Democratic Party that had been the party of the South, the party of white supremacy and the party of white privilege. Arguably, FDR started taking that apart. Harry Truman took a big hammer to it, but the big one was the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Acts in 64 and 65. And the Republicans looked at this and said, okay, the Democrats are giving up on the white racists, we'll take them. And whether you call that the Southern strategy or not, I mean, the fact of the matter is that the first speech that Ronald Reagan gave after he got the Republican nomination at the convention, the first speech he gave was at the Nebosha County Fair in Philadelphia, Mississippi, or right just down the road from Philadelphia, Mississippi, where Schwimmer, Cheney, and Goodman, the 3 civil rights workers, were brutally murdered back in the 60s. And his whole speech was about states' rights. And Don Trump Jr. did the exact same thing. His first speech was about states' rights at the Nebosha County State Fair near Philadelphia, Mississippi. You know, a whole bunch of white people showed up. You can Google it. There's pictures and everything. These guys are only barely hiding exactly what they're doing. So you don't need a lot of numbers to debunk this, Albert. All you need is common sense.